We have with us Rayid Ghjani, the chief scientist for the President Obama's campaign. Today we're going to do a mini press conference and I'll allow our partners to ask some questions. Welcome.
Thanks.
So I'm going to go and let our partners ask questions, and if there's a repeat, I'll go and repeat on the mic.
Okay,
Thank
sounds
you.
good.
Hi, my name is Chitra and I'm from VentureBeat. You mentioned that you used a number of consumer-facing tools in your campaign. Would you like to elaborate on them?
I mean, we used a large number of tools, but they weren't anything. We used all sorts of tools. We used databases. We used the HP Vertica database. We used things for analysis like Stata and R and Hadoop. We wrote our own code. We used Tableau for visualization internally. So we used all sorts of things. And the point was not to find the best tool find the one best tool, was to just figure out what the combination of tools we could use or build that could make an impact.
You also use social media in a big way. Facebook, Twitter, and all of the other platforms. So would you like to elaborate on that? Maybe share some numbers and statistics from there.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the big challenges we faced as a campaign was engaging younger people, and that's where social media was really useful, but we couldn't just blindly use social media by putting things on Facebook and hoping that something happens. So we spent a lot of time looking at our strategy, and then we built a completely new tool that had never been built before anywhere, which was really to take the social graph from Facebook and match that to the list of voters and try to figure out for a given person who is supporting us, who their friends are and how their friends can be advocates. So we would figure out this friend is really useful for getting to vote, and this person is really useful for getting persuaded, and this person is really useful for getting to be a volunteer. And then we would ask these people who are supporters to get them to go to, hey, ask these 7 people to go and vote, because these are 7 people who live in swing state, are likely voters. If you can get them to go and vote, they'll vote for us, and you can influence them. So that was a big strategy that we used, and a tool that we built that was called targeted sharing was really allowed us to get over 1 million users using this tool, getting 5-6 million people to go and do something based on that, and that had a massive impact.
Hi. Closer? You good? My name's Preeti. I'm a tech reporter for the Silicon Valley Business Journal. So given the success of using data, big data and analytics for the last campaign, how do you expect 2016 to go, and what changes are you expecting? Improvements, whatever.
Right. I mean, 2016 is going to be a very different election because you're going to have 2 people running for election who are not incumbents. So they're going to have to start from scratch and build an infrastructure, and they may not have enough time to do it. If the primaries go on for longer, then that becomes a challenge. And this time around, we were very lucky to have the head start to do this kind of work. So 2016, I think the big challenge is going to be how do you build an infrastructure early enough that allows you to really build on top of that. The second, I think, where the technology is going to play an even more important role is really personalizing the interactions between the campaign and the voters. So right today, this time, what we did was the campaign, the best people to convince somebody, a voter, were people who were just like them, not the campaign. The campaign wasn't doing a lot of broadcasting. The campaign was empowering our volunteers to then have these conversations. And I think next time around, that's going to be an even more technology focused, where we'll try to build a lot of technology that enables these volunteers to really have very personalized conversations with the voters and make an impact there.
Louder. 2016 will be more challenging for
I mean, 2016, the challenges, there will be more data because we'll be capturing more things. But the technology will also be better. Like 4 years ago, I couldn't have predicted what we would be doing this time around. And so 4 years from now, the technology will be better, it'll be more data. But I think the challenge isn't going to be how much data, how much technology. It's going to be more an organizational challenge of how do you set up an organization when you don't have the time to set it up? As I said, right? You don't have a year and a half to build it. You're going to have a few months. You need to be trying to win one primary after the second primary. And the focus is not elections in November, the focus is next primary. And once that's done, then the November election becomes important, but that's only the last few months. So that's going to be the big challenge, is how do you navigate that? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jaya with the Thai media team, and I have a quick question. You're here at TiEcon, which is pretty much known as an entrepreneurship conference, and big data is a big track here this year. You, however, talk about big data helping society like doing social good. Can you elaborate a bit on that, and not just in elections but in other spheres?
Yeah, one of the things that was motivating for me coming out of the elections is that a lot of the technologies we built and came up with and used are equally applicable in a lot of other social problems. So what I kind of came really excited and passionate about was I can take all this stuff that we've done and whatever we've learned from this and apply it to solve very concrete problems in education, in healthcare, in public safety, in transportation. And so what I've been kind of doing the past few months is really trying to figure out how to do that. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm part of the University of Chicago now and running a summer program where, as I said earlier, I have about 40 students coming to Chicago from around the country who are experts in these types of technologies and big data and computer science and statistics. And having them come and work on problems in these areas with nonprofits and government organizations with lots of, sort of real data. And one of the things we're trying to work on is try to look at education and making, how do we make people not apply to the right college and then not apply to, how do we prevent them from not applying to college sometimes? How do we encourage them? Same for healthcare. Can we predict who are the people at risk of certain kinds of diseases, or who are the kids who are at risk of childhood obesity, and detect that early enough that we could intervene. Same for a lot of problems in other areas in energy. How do you give the right sort of incentives to people that make them do the right thing and influence them? So pretty much in the elections what we learned was how to make predictions about who is at risk of some sort of behavior and figure out a way to influence them to change that behavior. And that applies in a lot of social problems. So I think from the entrepreneurship side, these are all big opportunities that if you have interest in making an impact in the world, you could go optimize some ads, which a lot of entrepreneurs do, or you could make a real impact that actually lasts after the ad is over. So I'm more excited about the world where you help people and make an impact that way than making ads better.
My name is Jasper Fakert with the Epoch Times newspaper. I read that you were involved in the recent Pakistani elections. May I ask how you applied what you learned here to those elections?
I'm not sure where you read that because I was not involved in the recent Pakistani elections.
Okay, so my question, I guess, in that case, how do you think things that you learned with these elections could be applied in other countries?
I think different countries are at different stages of sophistication with technology and politics and elections. The basic need for using this kind of information in elections is having the data available. A lot of countries aren't there yet. They don't have this data available. Some countries are going to get there. So the more UK and Australia are thinking about being more are significantly further ahead than certain other countries. So I think the first necessity is having the data, and the second thing, a lot of the things we did was we had a way of once we figured out what to do, we had volunteers to go do this work. A lot of countries don't have millions of volunteers who are going door to door and knocking on doors and doing these things. A lot of countries also, polling doesn't work the way it worked in the U.S. In the U.S., most people, when you ask them on the phone, who are you voting for, they're pretty open about it, and they'll tell you, and they're mostly honest. Other countries don't have the same cultural biases where they might not be comfortable telling you. So I think there are the differences, but there are also similarities. The similarities are how do you use technology and data to really mobilize a lot of people? How do you get them to be passionate about it? And then once they're passionate, where do you direct their passion is where I think other countries can learn from this.
Hi, Rayid. This is Sumit from Indus TV. I was wondering, you talked a little bit about technological advances making possible things that weren't possible 4 years earlier. Could you talk a little bit about maybe some advances in technology, maybe databases, MongoDB, Hadoop? Did you guys take advantage of those tools? And what did those tools make possible that wasn't possible before?
We did use all those tools. What a lot of those tools allowed us to do I think a lot of these, so when something becomes faster, there are two ways it affects you. One, you can do something faster, which means you can do more things. So in our analysis, we could do more analysis. We had more time to take, well, instead of doing one thing, I can do 10 things. The second thing it allows you to do is iterate much faster, right? So you try something, you see if it works, and you do it again, you do it again, you do it again. And you can make it better much faster if the feedback cycle was, if it took you, so 4 years ago, a lot of these things would have taken, overnight to analyze and then answer in the morning. Because of fast technology, we could have done that now in half an hour. And that meant that we don't run something and go home. We continue doing this and you're like, okay, half an hour. I can continue working on another problem for half an hour. So I think the technology changes in terms of, and this, well, second big thing was that we could store a lot of this data. It was so much cheaper to store data that we could just store everything we had, as opposed to, should I store this? Should I store that? How long should I store it for? Let's just store everything. So I think there were a lot of these basic differences that made our life much easier as people who were looking at data. So we didn't have to have the battle of, how much money are we spending on this? Money wasn't an issue in terms of infrastructure. It was, because the infrastructure wasn't that expensive.
One more question for you.
Hi, I'm Vandana from India Currents. What you're describing, if the data, the numbers are what's going to predict what the results are, especially for big elections like the US elections, are you saying that only people with the most resources, the most money, they're the ones who can do this? How do we, the people, still get our words and possibly vote for our candidates out there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because and I don't often say that. It's important to think about that, because what I'm not saying is that the data allows us to win the election. The data allows us to be more efficient at running a campaign. I can't drag you from your home to the polling booth, and I can make you vote a particular way. So I think in the future, you're absolutely right. What I wouldn't want a world to be is a place where people are winning an election because they have more money and they have better data and they have better technology. That's not the world I want to live in. Doesn't matter what side I'm on. I think the data and technology allows you to really raise the level of how the public and people are educated and informed, right? So that's the real power of the data. It's not that you can influence people to do certain things. I think that's a short-term goal, and right now that's what it's being used for. But eventually both sides will have that base level. So the next step is, we can do whatever analytics and data we want to do. What I often say is, we had millions of volunteers who were who were working with us and helping us. That we didn't get them through data. They came because they were passionate about Obama's policies, about what he was saying, and data. No amount of data would have caused these people to come and do the work. And without them, our data and analytics would have been completely useless. We would have said, here are the best people to persuade. Oh, but we don't have anybody to persuade them with. It was these millions of volunteers that really made the difference at the end. And that you can't replicate with data. You need the passion. And so I think that's sort of, and another view is, I think that, and one of the reasons why what I was talking about, what I was doing now is turning my focus onto large sort of social problems, because I think if you have people who are better educated and better informed, then they're less susceptible to sort of these kinds of influence. Like they're more looking for information, and then they make their decisions. The political campaigns really become more information or informative tools, and they're focusing their campaigns on what information does this person need? If you're 18-year-old, I don't need to tell you about Medicare policies, I'll tell you about your student loans, about staying on your parents' healthcare, and that's what's important to you. So analytics is going to be used for more personalization about what information you need, and then that person is better informed and hopefully makes the right decision for themselves.
So, Rayid, one more question. You are the chief scientist. That's a great
I
title.
was.
Well, you will be, for us you still are, especially related to that campaign. Quick question about that. Now, we haven't seen chief scientist or chief or data scientist being a very cool term before, but I read an article recently which said that data scientist is one of the sexiest new jobs of the decade, if not the century. So, any thoughts about that? And how would you, suppose my son wanted to go ahead and become a data scientist, what would you advise him?
I mean, I think you have that hype and buzz around a lot of things, and it sort of goes and comes and goes and comes. And in my mind, I think people who can look at evidence, which is data. So data is basically evidence of something, and make sense of that and use that to make better decisions are always going to be important, right? In the past, you might argue that they weren't that important, mostly because there was no evidence to go with. There was no data there to really make that, and so people who were in power were the people who had, were making gut-based decisions. And now, when the guts are being challenged, people who have evidence. Now, the challenge is that you have that power. You also have to use it for the right direction. If you have the power to influence people, you can influence them in either direction. And if you work for Philip Morris, you're influencing them to buy cigarettes. If you're working for a nonprofit, you're trying to get them to stay in college. And I think that's the challenge that I would hope that most people with these kinds of backgrounds realize the responsibility they have, and do something for the good of the world as opposed to trying to manipulate people in the short term.
So it's not just the spin, it's the social growth, right? Thank you.
Thanks.
So the question that she asked, I think, is a question that's relevant to everybody. What was it like to work for President Obama?
I worked for the campaign, not for the president. There's a difference.
You're still working for the man.
Yes, absolutely, and it was a very. There were lots of experiences. For every positive thing, there's a negative word, right? So it was rewarding, but also stressful. It was very intense, both in a good and bad way. We were there, all of us, for a year and a half. And my team, sort of the team I was part of, we were in a back room, closed up, about 40 people in this small room because we had to be behind that thing, and it was at times, physically just really hot and crowded, and we were there 18, 20 hours a day at times, and so, but it was worth it. We were able to, as a team, achieve something that we're proud of, and that's hopefully is good for, at least the country and hopefully the world. But it was a very challenging time. It wasn't, it wasn't easy where we're just kind of having fun. There were a lot of fun times, and there were a lot of very stressful, and we had a deadline, and the deadline couldn't be moved, and it was, it was hard, but we sort of came through it as a team.
Well, thank you for doing that, because we're happy you did. But just like any other project, I'm sure it was stressful. So we're going to conclude with our last question. Being that you're here at TiEcon, what insight, tip, or advice do you have for the rest of the attendees and the people hearing your voice?
That's a tough question. Because I don't think of myself as somebody who's sort of done so much in this world that I can now start giving advice. I only know so much, and my experiences are fairly limited. So I think for me, this is, honestly, I didn't know that much about TiEcon. So after coming here, I've learned a lot about what kind of people are here, and it's really inspiring to sort of see people from all these different areas kind of coming together, and not just for a commercial purpose. And I think that's what really encouraging for me is, and if I have any advice, it's keep doing this. If you've got sort of, people have their day jobs and they care about how to do marketing for Cisco better, that's great, you should do that. But if you also have the side passions, figure out a way to embed them into your real passions, because if both of them converge, I think that's the real, that's where really good things happen. So.
Well, you said the right thing, because this is volunteer driven, so I think I really appreciate your words. So thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to conclude the press conference now, and if anybody wants to take any photos, you're welcome to do so.